Hey everyone, if you want to make your own podcast but you don't know where to begin, Spotify for Podcasters makes it super easy. They've got everything in one place, it's totally free, and you can make money while doing it. Here's how it works. Spotify for Podcasters lets you record and edit podcasts right from your phone or computer, so no matter what your setup is like, you can start doing it today. Then you can distribute your podcast to Spotify and pretty much everywhere else podcasts are heard. Video podcasts are also supported, and you can even conduct polls and Q&As. With Spotify for Podcasters, you can earn money in a variety of ways, including ads and podcast subscriptions. And best of all, the platform is totally free. No catch, totally free. When I wanted to start my own podcast, I did not know where to begin, and I didn't think it was even possible. And Spotify for Podcasters made it happen. They made it easy, they made it quick, and I am doing something that I love. What more can I ask for? So if you're interested in starting your own show, you can do it, and I highly recommend you give this a try. Download the Spotify for Podcasters app or go to www.spotify.com/podcasters to get started. Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Everything Kratom, the podcast about anything and everything Kratom. It's great to have you with us on this Monday morning. I hope everybody out there is doing well. I know that right now, the current global situation is a bit on edge, and that's something that has been getting harder and harder to ignore. Not that I think anyone is trying to ignore it. I know I certainly am not, but it's just something that's on my mind right now, and so I thought that I would mention it here today. But with that said, we're starting off a new week. So I was thinking, how should we start off a new week? And I was looking for some articles or just some different tidbits or something. And I came across an article that is about my favorite type of kratom. So I was really excited. White Indo. So I think I did one on White Indo last week, but hopefully people aren't getting too sick of hearing about the same one. I'll try and mix it up some more this week. But I came across this article with the headline that says, "Can consuming White Indo Kratom help treat ADHD?" That sounds intriguing. And I think at this point, most people know someone who has ADHD or they haven't themselves, which is a conversation for another time. I think that's also fascinating that you see such a prevalence of this thing that I feel like maybe not everyone should have, but now it seems like everyone has, but that's a whole nother conversation, right? So anyway, but I think it's something that most people at least have some sort of connection to one way or another, is my point. So that's another reason why I thought that I would look at this today. So it says, what is ADHD? And of course, I kind of understand what it is, but it's always helpful for me, in my opinion, to have a definition in front of me when I'm talking about something or thinking about it, because it's just good to have a consistent idea of the definition of something that you're talking about. So to establish a basic definition here, it says, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, or simply ADHD, is a neurodevelopmental disorder. It's most commonly diagnosed in childhood, but can last well into adulthood. It says, there's lack of attention or inattention, impulsive or disruptive behavior linked with it, excessive activity and restlessness, forgetfulness, emotional regulation issues, etc. And it says because people living with ADHD, deal with these symptoms or, traits of ADHD, it makes a lot of basic tasks a lot more difficult for them to remain focused or, for more extended periods of time, or they're restless and unable to spend time in the same position or activity. And that can negatively affect school or work or, other things. So that is establishing a ground, definition of what ADHD is and kind of how it pops up in people. So now going down into the article a bit more, this is where it starts getting interesting. Kratom and ADHD. It says, people with ADHD have inconsistent or low levels of dopamine and norepinephrine. These neurotransmitters are located in the brain, and their low levels lead to difficulties with focus and attention. Contrary to that, inconsistent levels of dopamine can cause hyperactivity and restlessness. So I didn't know any of this. And then it says, kratom affects the dopamine D1 receptor. It regulates dopamine levels in the brain, effectively alleviating ADHD symptoms. That means Kratom can help ADHD patients to maintain sharp focus, stay involved in the same activity for a longer time, regulate their emotions. Furthermore, Kratom is an all-natural substance, unlike synthetic medication that can cause numerous side effects and health complications after prolonged use. Kratom doesn't instigate such adverse effects. So, this is obviously a bit oversimplified on that second part. Like, it's interesting that Kratom, affects the dopamine D1 receptor. I think that's fascinating. I haven't, been learning anything about that until recently and how it's really acting on our bodies down to that level. But at the same time, then it says, it regulates dopamine levels in the brain, effectively alleviating ADHD symptoms. I have a feeling it's a little more complex than that. So, of course, as always, let's take this with a grain of salt. But with that said, I think that it's super interesting that there's this, potential to regulate dopamine, and that dopamine is linked to ADHD. Then at the bottom, it has a list of popular Kratom strains for ADHD. And the ones that it lists, it goes from red to white to green. And here are the ones they list: red Borneo, red Bali, red Sumatra. Then it says white Indo and white Horn. And then it says green Mangda. So I think that's a good list of Kratom, of varieties of Kratom. I've had all of those at least once now. White Horn, a good amount of times. White Indo, probably the most, and green Mangda, the second most. And here's where it kind of gets a little bit iffy for me in terms of how to talk about this, because, I can't obviously say what it's like to have ADHD because I don't have it, but I know that some of these types of Kratom do help me with things that are also seen as, symptoms of ADHD, although of course I know that, I'm not experiencing anything comparative to what people who have ADHD are experiencing, so definitely I'm not claiming that. But just from my own limited, insight into, let's say, I'm not able to concentrate, I can definitely stand by at least the white Indo, white Horn, green Mangda aspect. White Horn, I would probably need to combine it with something else, but white Indo, green Mangda, I guess white Horn too. I think that I could stand by all three of those as being helpful for me when it comes to things that people with ADHD deal with on an extreme level. There's a way of putting it. A nice, safe way of putting it that doesn't get me in trouble. Ooh, yay. I hope you all know what I mean, though. I mean, I think that, white Indo, definitely, I talk about it all the time. It helps me with my work, and it helps me stay focused and gives me a great boost of energy. It also takes away any of my, if I'm really exhausted, it takes away my fatigue almost instantly. Green Mangda, a little bit slower to come on, but it improves my mood. It makes me focus a lot, and it does take away a good amount of my fatigue. And then white Horn, when I combine that with something else, I think it takes away the jitteriness of something else that might be a little bit too uppity. And that also seems to be something that a lot of the ADHD medications are meant to do, So I feel like there's some crossover there that I can see, or that I can at least to a very limited degree relate to. Then there's another article. Well, this isn't really an article, but it's a posting on kratomscience.com, which they are great. They do a lot of research. And this is actually a research post. And what they posted was a page about ADHD and Kratom and, some of whatever evidence there is of Kratom either helping or not helping ADHD symptoms. And so they said there's very little in the scientific literature about Kratom and ADHD. Analyzing the results of an online survey conducted by Oliver Grunman in 2017, researchers found the highest percentage of respondents among mental health conditions with significant improvement were for ADHD and ADD, 60.3% of those respondents. But to date, no studies have addressed the use or effectiveness of Kratom in the treatment or management of ADHD, and only a few qualitative studies have indicated potential benefits of Kratom in mitigating or managing anxiety disorders. For those of you who are science nerds, it then gets into the science behind this in that study, and that's definitely a lot more difficult for me to understand, and I would read it out loud to you all, but for anyone who isn't trying to listen to the science aspect, I don't want to bore you. So, but for those of you who are interested, I will link it in the description of this podcast. Then it goes on to mention a few other things. There's another case study with someone else who has unspecified anxiety disorder, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, benzodiazepine use disorder and opioid use disorder, and how this might have linked to kratom-induced seizures. Then there's another case study. Patient with ADHD developed a high tolerance for kratom, consuming 30 grams per day at the peak and was no longer experiencing beneficial effects. Oh my goodness. Wow. That's crazy. That's a lot. Then there's another one. Unlike the patient in the previous study, some have managed to successfully consume kratom along with ADHD medication with beneficial results. Oh, so this is talking about in conjunction with their ADHD medication. This one, it pulls the quote. It says, "I use kratom to supplement my ADHD medication. It has a tendency to cause me anxiety on the backside of medication effects, among other side effects. Kratom balances out the negative side effects of my ADHD meds very well." So that's interesting, because now, that's not really kratom helping with ADHD. That's it helping with the ADHD medication, which is very interesting. Another one. This is another commenter on kratomscience.com. This person has ADHD and finds kratom beneficial, and he says, "I use kratom with marijuana. I have severe pain problems along with ADHD, anxiety, manic depression, something else which I will not be able to pronounce, and many other issues. I am not on a single doctor prescription anymore or on any illegal drugs." Another person. "I'm in my second year of researching kratom. I've lost over 100 pounds and have not had a cigarette in just under 2 years. It works with my lifestyle and ADHD." So I really like this posting by Kratom Science because they don't claim anything. They're just putting it out there, which is, a telltale sign of a great source. So there's a number of studies that show that it's not helping and it might even have negative effects. But there are other factors there, and there are other substances involved. Then there's, a few comments here and a few people's personal stories where they said that it was beneficial, and one case study that does say it was beneficial. And then they have 12 comments on the bottom. And this is also, this is just as good as the content on the page, right? Like, comments are people's stories. It's people who actively want to share what's going on with them. The one thing I do want to say is that whenever you're on a page looking at kratom, or at least this is what I always think of, but I'm always trying to be unbiased, right? And when I'm looking at a page that has comments by people and it has to do with kratom, I'm assuming that most of them are going to be proponents of kratom, or at least have had a positive, experience with kratom, versus people who've had negative experiences with kratom or don't agree with it. They might be less likely to go onto a forum and post about it. I might be wrong about that, but that's just kind of like my underlying assumption. But I have no data to back that one up. And as a sociology anthropology major, I have to say on public record, I'm not saying that that is definitely the case. For any sociology nerds out there. Okay, so looking at the comments on the bottom, there are a number of comments. They pretty much are all positive. They all have very interesting, situations. They're not just all people with ADHD. They have various circumstances, but the common denominator is that there's ADHD involved in most all of these. One of them, the person has ADD, not ADHD, but a similar circumstance where they're using it in conjunction with their ADHD medication, or ADD medication, sorry. Another person with ADHD using it in conjunction with their medicine. So it seems like something that often happens is people use it in conjunction with amphetamines, kratom, and it's to help with the effects of the amphetamines. But there are a couple people who also post on here that kratom helps them not use any medicine, and that it's helping with their ADHD. So mixed results. I think overall there's definitely something to look into there, as with anything that has to do with kratom, because it's just like the new frontier, people, right? There's a lot that should be looked into, and I don't doubt for a second that there's some potential to help with ADHD, or at the very least, and I wasn't even thinking about this when I started this episode, but you know how there are often commercials on TV for anyone who watches TV. I don't watch TV much, but once in a while I'll see a commercial, and it'll be for a medication that's for another medication. Like, there will be a medication that's already out there, and then a common side effect that happens from that medication that now needs a fix. And so they come up with a different medication, or another company does, and it says, "Are you on this other medication, but you're having trouble with this thing now? Well, here's this medication." So I see that so often, and if you're using medications to fix the issues that pop up from other medications, I just can see that like being like a domino effect into having like, you know, the 30-day calendar pill plastic container where you have like 8 pills every day and ones that you have to take every few days. And, you know, I can see how it would lead to that pretty quickly because so many pills could, you know, have side effects, and you can make a pill to address those side effects, but it's like now you're taking something else. So I wasn't even thinking about this when I started the podcast, but I think it's interesting because if this is how it relates back to Kratom and ADHD, in my opinion. So many of the people, it seems like almost half of the people that I've been reading about or comments from who use Kratom to help with ADHD are using it for their ADHD, and the other half are like using it for the medications that they're taking for ADHD. And one person commented on that Kratom Science page and was talking about how they use Vyvanse and Adderall or something like that, and that it works for them, but going to work, it's like socially awkward because amphetamines make them socially awkward, and says like, you know, like they don't laugh at all, like, or they don't joke at all when they're on that, and it kind of changes their personality a bit. And I think that I've, you know, heard a lot from people saying that that's the case. But that, you know, Kratom kind of helps put the human side into it. And I've read that from a few other people in different places on Reddit in the past. I've also read a lot about how Kratom is helpful with the jittery aspect of ADHD medications. That people are taking Vyvanse or Adderall or, you know, Concerta or whatever the medication is, and that they're feeling jittery as a result of that, even though now they can focus and sit in one place for 10 minutes. And that Kratom smooths out the ride. And so even if Kratom ends up not, you know, once there's some studies into this, more studies, because, you know, even that one study I was mentioning at the beginning of that page at Kratom Science was from 2017. Once there's some more up-to-date studies on this, even if it goes to show that Kratom doesn't help with ADHD directly, it's still just as helpful, in my opinion, to be looking at, well, if Kratom helps with the medications people have to take with, you know, for ADHD, as long as it doesn't have a bad effect when combined with those medications, that's something that can be just as helpful, right? Because I think a lot of the conversation around Kratom and the pharmaceutical industry is that it's like a threat to the pharmaceutical industry and yada, 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 which, you know, in a lot of ways, I'm sure there's some merit there. But I feel like it could also, you know, work in conjunction with it. If you don't want to make an enemy where you don't need to. And so if on the off chance one day, tra-la-la, the world is wonderful, Kratom is legal everywhere, growing in the fields, which, you know, that's not going to happen, come to think of it, given that, that there's no jungles in Vermont or New York. You know, but in that amazing future that might exist one day to some degree, I can imagine turning on the TV and seeing a commercial and being like, hey, you have ADHD, and do you take Adderall or Vyvanse for your ADHD, but you're suffering from jitters and you can't write straight and you just feel on edge too much? You know, Kratom. Instead of another medication, Kratom. So that would be interesting. Definitely needs more studies. And of course, when you're mixing Kratom with any other substance, you really got to know that it's not going to have any negative, you know, effects. And like I said, when talking about that one study on the Kratom Science page where the person was on a number of medications, and one of the medications was for their ADHD, and they took Kratom, and then they had some sort of seizure, and they were wondering if it was a Kratom-linked seizure. You know, even though that person had a lot of medications, they were taking a lot of Kratom, and there's a lot of factors, it's something to take into account. So there you go. There's one study there, one potential case where someone had a seizure related to their Kratom intake while they were on all these other substances as well. So it's just, you know, everybody should be safe. You know, always be safe. But with that said, I think there's a lot of potential, and I'm excited to see what comes down the road when it comes to Kratom and ADHD, especially because so many people have ADHD now, or at least so many people are being diagnosed with it. It'd be great to have something that was a natural alternative for that as well, officially recognized. So that would be great. Then again, back to the battle with the pharmaceutical industry. Anyway, let's leave it there. So, fascinating topic. I hope you find it interesting, and let me know what you think. So, hope everybody's week is off to a great start. Keep on keeping on. the world might be having some crazy things happening, but you do your part and then you keep moving. That's also part of doing your part, is to keep moving, keep living, keep breathing, enjoy your life as much as possible. So let's keep on keeping on, and we will be back tomorrow. Thanks so much for listening, and talk to you then. Bye-bye.